All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another FBS conference logo ranking. Today we are looking at the SEC. This is by far the most dominant conference in all of NCAA Division I FBS football, and it's probably been the one most of y'all have been looking forward to the most. I know this is one that I was really excited to put together, and just like we said last week when we discussed the Mountain West, I am running risks every time I make one of these videos of creating enemies. So I almost feel the need to make a disclaimer to say this is for entertainment purposes only, but more specifically, these are just my opinions when I'm putting these together. So leave all of your criticism and vitriol down in the comment section below. But whether you agree with my opinions or not, I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the SEC Conference primary logo ranking, starting as always from worst to first, which today at number 16 is going to give us Vanderbilt. Oh, poor Vandy, poor Commodores. This is easily the worst logo in this conference, and it's not even close. Vandy, the Commodores really shot themselves in the foot a couple years ago when they changed to this oversimplified gradient V here. It starts a little darker towards the bottom and then gets a little lighter, and that gold color going up towards the tips of the V. For the longest time, they were using this star design with the V inside of the star, and this really stood out because there's not a ton of star logos in NCAA. I mean, there's not a ton that I'm familiar with anyway. This is really the one that kind of came to mind. And in 2022, Vanderbilt decided they did not want to do this anymore. They wanted to stand out with this gold V. It's boring, it's lame. We've seen it before, done better with programs like Villanova or Virginia. I'm not sure why Vanderbilt felt the need to reinvent the wheel over here, but as a neutral to not only just this school, but this conference as a whole, objectively, this was a step in the backwards direction here. I have no idea why Vanderbilt chose to do this. And I mean, there are some fans that passionately hate this, and I can't say I blame them. I found this great quote from Vanderbilt graduate Christian Deandra, who wrote in a column for For the Win, said that Vanderbilt University gave a small but passionate fan base a change they did not ask for. They eliminated a recognizable icon of their faith with a generic video game created team Microsoft Word looking logo that is the opposite of special. It's rote, it's cliche. It's the Villanova logo in a different gradient. I mean, that is absolutely spot on, absolutely roasted there. And I couldn't agree more, and is saying what's probably on the mind for every single Vanderbilt graduate out there. At number 15, let's turn our attention to another kind of like hot button logo here. This is Kentucky. We're using a logo that's strikingly similar to Houston. I mean, when we talked about the AAC conference, we explored the Houston Cougars logo. And yeah, they must have used the same designer here because it looks exactly the same. You know, the K, they kind of revamped that in recent years and took away a little bit of kind of the angularity of that K. They call it the power K, and there's a huge kind of movement to go back to using that specific K. Feel free to join on Twitter or X now, return the power K at Stop the Crooked K. It just shows that there are people extremely passionate about kind of reverting Kentucky's logo back to what it used to be, because it did have a semblance of power. I mean, literally the power K. And they've used some logos in the past that kind of helped the Wildcat itself stand out, and the Wildcat has always had a ton of personality to it, you know, but I'm not knocking on Kentucky for not using the Wildcat. I'm knocking on them for using a very generic, boring, and bland UK that looks, again, just exactly like Houston. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out this kind of newer alternate logo that, if you aren't aware, it looks like two birds doing the deed if you flip it on its side. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. And because I saw this, you had to as well. At number 14, let's take a look at Mississippi State. A pretty solid logo here with a big M and a banner of state across the front of it, doing its job well and effectively. And yeah, nothing really too upsetting about this logo. It looks great. They've always kind of had more of an emphasis of leaning into the lettering of the school, MSU for Mississippi State, or in this case, what they're using now, just a giant M for Mississippi, again, with just state thrown in a banner in front. Mississippi is a long state name, and especially when your school is Mississippi State, you know, it's just a lot of text. So it's good to just kind of emphasize just a big M for Mississippi or MSU for Mississippi State. I'm a fan of all those looks, and I'm a fan of the looks that they've given us in the past that have kind of put emphasis into their bulldog. Yeah, Mississippi State, good stuff here. That's what's kind of difficult about ranking some of these logos half the time in some of these conferences, is that even the logos that we have placed on the lower end are still pretty good. And it just speaks to the longevity of some of these logos here. Again, I'm going to do my best not to say the word iconic. I throw that out there in so many of these videos, and this conference, these schools have been around for so long that you can make a case for any of these logos that they kind of have like an iconic, nationally recognized identity to them. All that being said, let's take a look at number 13, LSU, Louisiana State University, home of the Tigers. The first of three Tigers that we're going to look at in these 16 teams today. Kind of like we mentioned with Mississippi State, saying Louisiana State University, having all those letters, that big title would be a mouthful. So way more commonly known as LSU rather than Louisiana State University. And yeah, leaning into that with their logo here. And the font here, I love the font that they're using. The S and U specifically have both curved corners and angular corners, 90-degree corners on there. And it makes this unique combination of being both kind of like rounded, but also sharp and angular on some of those corners for those letters. I like that. It's a really cool effect. And I'll say something to this effect several points throughout this ranking here, but I wish this school, LSU, would lean more into their tiger, which they've done historically in the past. They've kind of put more emphasis on that tiger. But in 2014, for whatever reason, they decided to drop the tiger altogether and just kind of like lean into the lettering LSU. And we'll see other schools in this conference that had kind of have that same energy of just leaning into the lettering or the name of the school rather than the mascot. I mean, we just looked at one of those with Mississippi State and Kentucky. But that tiger specifically, something about it. I mean, there's just so much characterization, so much energy coming off of it, so much to the point that even on like the 50-yard line of their stadium here, they have one of the coolest logos in college football with just like the eye of that tiger. It's intense, it's ferocious, it's intimidating, it's a beauty. And I wish that they would use more, again, of just like that tiger into their primary logo. The LSU, that purple with the yellow trim, I mean, it looks fine. It just looks fine. It looks good. It looks fine. Nothing a whole lot to write home about, though. You know, again, lean into that tiger, and we're talking business here. And at number 12, let's take a look at something kind of similar in this regard. We're just staying on theme here with Ole Miss, officially known as the University of Mississippi, but they go by Ole Miss. And I love the font on this straight up. The cursive looks fantastic. The big, bold red with a little bit of blue trim look awesome. And that's really where the story ends with Ole Miss, because again, starting in 2002, it's kind of when they started using just this cursive name of the school logo for Ole Miss. And I totally understand why, you know, kind of wanting to remove themselves with sort of the imagery of their rebel mascot. Historically not been a great look. I get why they wanted to phase out of this. You know, they went from having like the rebel live mascot into the rebel bear. And yeah, I gotta say, he looked really cool for sure, but they have kind of adapted the mascot once again into the Ole Miss land shark. And yeah, definitely one of the most unique mascots in college athletics. And this one is super unique to Ole Miss specifically because a few years ago, the defense specifically for their football teams really leaned into this kind of like a land shark vibe, where anytime they made a great play, an interception, fumble recovery, that kind of thing, they throw up their hand onto the helmet to kind of emulate the land shark. It's just a very cool tradition that kind of caught on across, you know, all of the athletics as a whole. Even like their basketball team was doing that. And so I'm a huge fan of this land shark vibe. I think that's super cool. The mascot's really interesting and super unique to Ole Miss. So it'd be cool, like give it a couple years, you know, they might maybe consider throwing like a land shark sort of vibe into their primary logo. Who knows? But all I can say is until then, again, this script text logo here for Ole Miss, it's crisp, it's sharp, it's beautiful, and it's working for me as far as, you know, a logo that's just leaning into the name of the school or the lettering for the school. At number 11, let's take a look at a fresh face to the SEC. This is Oklahoma, home of the Sooners here, with a time-tested, tried and true OU that I'm not going to use the I word. I'm not going to say iconic, but this is a nationally recognized logo, and for good reason. I mean, it's simple, yet it's effective. They've always kind of like had this OU vibe. Even looking at some of their like older logos that they've used, they found a recipe and made it work, you know, with a red O and U kind of stacked into each other like that. It's worked for a long time, and they found a great formula for it here at the turn of the century, with the font that they're using kind of having better angles to it, being a little bit more symmetrical in the O and the U, kind of like a flat yet bold and sophisticated look. I think it looks great. It totally works for me on the helmets and uniforms, and it is a heck of a lot simpler than what they could try to use with, you know, as far as having like mascot imagery, because they're home of the Sooners. It's, you know, they got the Sooner schooner with the old chuck wagon imagery. That, you know, it's a difficult motif and name to kind of lean into for a primary logo. So to kind of simplify it with just an O and a U for Oklahoma University, it's smart. They made it work. It's effective, and I'm digging it. And we're going to kind of have a trend here of kind of single letters, or maybe one or two letters to represent the school, as we're turning our attention to number 10. This is Auburn, the second of three tigers that we're going to look at today, that I think is just doing an incredible job at incorporating the school colors here of orange and blue. Timeless color combination, always looked great. And this is a logo, again, that the school has been using for a very long time. That's true for just about every single one of the schools in this conference. They all have found their footing a long time ago and have not strayed away from that, which is why a lot of these logos are as nationally recognized as they are, because again, they found the formula, it worked, and why change it? Vanderbilt. But yeah, Auburn doing it very well here. Classic looking font, the A popping out in front of the giant U in the background for a really cool stacked and layered effect. It's really working for me. I'm absolutely about this. Yeah, War Eagle, Auburn, great look. Moving on to number 9, let's take a look at the Tennessee Volunteers. And it's been done very effectively. They've kind of like had different times, like kind of more implementations of that T, or even like a UT for University of Tennessee, keeping the same colors every time, that kind of like creamsically orange color. You love it or you hate it. I'm a big fan of it personally. I think this looks fantastic, you know, but that orange does have its fair share of criticisms.
Tennessee's colors is that throw up orange. It's not that orange that you can sit with. It's that puke inside of a pumpkin orange. And I don't like pumpkins.
Might be worth noting that the women's teams go by the Lady Volunteers and they have their own unique logo, especially like their basketball team specifically, very nationally known and recognized powerhouse of women's basketball. So kind of just wanted to point that out there, that the Lady Volunteers use a different tee, and that looks great too. It's very blocky. It kind of reminds me of like the Nolan Ryan era Texas Rangers. And Tennessee also kind of has like an alternate branding with incorporating Smokey, which is the name of their dog mascot. And yeah, Smokey, super good boy. I really enjoy kind of that alternate identity and branding for Tennessee Volunteers. Yeah, I love this look. At number 8, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the Georgia Bulldogs, a national powerhouse football team in recent years. And I mean, historically, they've all been winners. And historically, all of these schools here in the SEC, we kind of mentioned that in the intro, but just super dominant. Not even just in football, but I mean, this is a huge like baseball powerhouse. Their basketball programs, men and women's. I mean, this is just a powerhouse of athletics. And yeah, Georgia here, no different. That big, bold G carries kind of like the power and the prestige behind this conference as a whole. But I mean, my real criticism with this logo comes from that it is more or less a copy-paste job of the Green Bay Packers. They are using this with permission from the Packers, as are the Grambling State Tigers, who we discussed when we talked about the SWAC conference. And apparently this G is slightly slimmer when you compare it to the Packers G. I don't know. I could see it barely, but it's still too close to say that it's especially unique or different from the Green Bay Packers. Still a fantastic logo, no knock on that, with great colors on it too. I mean, the colors have always looked great, even when kind of before this G, or even like with some alternate logos that they've used when they focused on the Bulldog. That Bulldog is so sick, just oozing with personality. And I'll be honest, I like these looks a heck of a lot better than the G that they're using now, but I don't dislike it. It does have a boldness, it does have a presence, it does have an intensity to it. So I got to give it the respect it deserves for that. And speaking of national football powerhouse teams, at number 7, we've got the Alabama Crimson Tide, probably the most dominant college football team ever historically, and they have a logo to back it up with that big, bold A. It's got a nice flow to it. It's got these really cool little pointed tips on the top of the A, the horizontal line in the middle, and then at the feet on the bottom of the A. I just love all those little pointed tips with the roundness and the kind of like curvature of this as well. Fantastic look. It's kind of the same reason why I really like the Atlanta Braves A logo. I think that's so strong. I just really love the way it flows, the movement, the curves. I mean, for a single letter to represent the team, it kind of has its own unique personality to it in that way. I've also really liked the looks that they've used that have the elephant imagery in it. I know they're called the Crimson Tide. They kind of have that elephant. Apparently the story goes, there was a reporter years ago that said that the team was as large as elephants, and so they kind of like took that and ran with it, and that's why they kind of have like the elephant imagery that still holds true as far as like, it seems like Alabama players, they're always just bringing that presence, bringing that toughness. There is absolutely an air of prestige and notoriety when it comes to playing up against Alabama. Everyone wants to beat Bama. Everybody wants the opportunity to play Bama. And I think that this A absolutely delivers on the prestige, the notoriety, and the dominance that the name of Alabama carries. And guys, we're over the halfway mark. We've got 6 more teams to talk about here, and I hope you're enjoying this video. If you are, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel, because we've got more conferences, more sports leagues lined up to rank for logos. So if you don't want to miss out on the fun, go ahead and be sure and subscribe. Getting back to the video here at number 6, we've got South Carolina, home of the Gamecocks. This might be the only time that I will say in this video that this is a sneaky, underrated logo that I just don't think gets the attention that it deserves here. It's truly one of the few in the SEC that's kind of combining both the mascot elements, the Gamecock, the rooster there, with an element of like location or context, a giant C kind of behind the Gamecock to represent Carolina. So we can see it both. We can see Carolina, the big C for Carolina, and the Gamecock, this big crazy looking rooster. I'm a big fan of like the insane rooster. We had a logo similar like this when we talked about Jacksonville State, and yeah, that thing is just absolutely ready to scrap. I mean, taking a look at that logo that they used from 66 to 75, they took that exact rooster, that Gamecock, and threw it in front of this giant C for Carolina. So it definitely carries with it those notes of like history and being kind of time honored in that way. And I mean, I love like the alternate, some of the, like the logos that they've used in the past as well. That deranged looking rooster on the right is just so much fun to look at. I love the colors on this too, kind of like that darker maroonish red with black and white. Great, excellent color combination. And yeah, South Carolina, the only time I'm going to say in this league, sneaky, underrated. Also have a very fantastic like font script that they've been using recently on their helmets with a very crisp and clean Carolina in cursive. Big fan of that look, and I'm a huge fan of the South Carolina Gamecocks as a whole, as I also am with our number 5 pick, the Missouri Tigers, the third and final Tiger that we're going to talk about today, and definitely my favorite of the 3 here. Because unlike the LSU Tigers and the Auburn Tigers, the Missouri Tigers are leaning into their Tiger. It is the primary focus of their primary logo, an electric, literally, I mean, he's got like lightning going through him. Tiger logo here that's showcasing the great colors of yellow, black and white. Man, this thing looks so tough and so crisp. Definitely more of kind of like a modernized, like sleeker logo that we've seen, that's maybe not necessarily dripping with all the historical trimmings of some of these logos that we've already taken a look at. But yeah, I just love the aggressive intensity from the Tiger. And we're going to kind of run into a string a little bit coming up here with our top 5, featuring some logos here that kind of lean more into the mascot. Personally, I'm just a bigger fan of that, which is why we have them ranked a little higher. But again, I would love to hear your guys' comments down below as far as what your favorite logos are for this conference, who your favorite schools are, who you cheer for in the SEC. Because again, fantastic teams here, much like our number 4 pick with Texas A&M. Now, A&M did a really smart thing here a couple years ago where they took their logo with the giant T and the A and the M on either side of it and stuck it in front of the silhouette of Texas. We talked about that with South Carolina as far as having a logo that represents both the name of the school and then kind of giving it more of like a context of location and place, and putting a logo or a name in front of the state of Texas is kind of like a cheat code for making a solid logo if your school happens to be in Texas, because that's one of the most recognized state shapes in the country for sure. There's people that take a lot of pride in the shape itself of Texas. And I mean, I live in San Antonio. I haven't lived here forever. I've only been here a few years, but even in the time I've been here, I've come to just kind of like appreciate that more as far as like understanding why people have such an affinity to the shape, the silhouette of Texas. There's a pride that people take in that, and I understand it better now that I live here. And so I think that was a genius decision for Texas A&M, who have kind of like a simple logo if we're looking at it just for like the context in just like the T and the A and the M for Texas A&M. Solid, simple, bold fonts on that. But again, sticking it in front of the silhouette of Texas kind of elevates it. And I love to, even if we're just looking at the T and the A and the M, there is kind of like a glossy effect on the T itself. It really makes the T stand out. So you have this like popping T for Texas that kind of shines through, as well as this beautiful maroon and white coloring going on throughout. Yeah, Texas A&M. This is a phenomenal looking logo. I've really appreciated some of their logos that they use in the past as well. And I got to give a shout out to another beautiful dog here. This is Reve, who is officially known as the First Lady of Aggieland and the highest ranking member of the Texas A&M Corps of Cadets, which is just like it's so cool to me, but it's also just so funny. Like, their love and embrace of Reve, this dog here. I'm a big fan of that. I'm just a huge fan of live mascots in general. I know that there are more throughout the SEC that we haven't talked about yet, but this one specifically, like Reve, does not influence where we have Texas A&M ranked at number 4, but I just had to give a shout out to that. But cracking into our top 3 here, let's go ahead and take a look at Arkansas, home of the Razorbacks. And I'm trying not to let my bias show a little bit on this one because I do have most of my family that live in Arkansas, so I've been looking at this logo for a long time. Every time I go visit them in central Arkansas, this is a logo that you see all over the state. People really embracing and loving the Razorback logo here, which thematically has remained pretty much the exact same since 1931. I mean, God, we're creeping up on 100 years of a running Razorback going from left to right with all the speed in the world. He's got his front feet under his back feet, and he is absolutely bounding and sprinting in that, again, left to right direction. I just, can't say enough about the longevity of this design. Even the logos they've used that haven't had that bounding hog, that just kind of focus more on the hog head, are just so much fun to look at. Again, trying not to be biased here, but it might be slipping a little bit. I absolutely love everything that Arkansas has done. Can't say enough. Woo Pig Sooie. Bring on the hogs. I love this logo. And at number 2, for a lot of similar reasons, we've got the Florida Gators. Man, one of the meanest, toughest looking primary logos here with that big green gator ready to chomp down. It's really highlighting and showcasing all the gorgeous coloring that the Florida Gators offer. Again, with that green, but also that like really bright neon orange and even like a hint of blue. I mean, take a look at some of these old throwback logos. The Gator always had tough personality and has always had great coloring. I mean, the University of Florida doing a hell of a lot for me here with this Gator. And I got to say, this is near impossible to beat. But at number 1, we've got our other newcomer in the SEC. This is the Texas Longhorns, who have arguably the most iconic of the iconic SEC logos that's just known and recognized globally. And it works on such a simple, like genius design here, which is having a silhouette of the team name, the Longhorns, perfectly symmetrical. You're looking at it like face first. And again, working so simply by just using the burnt orange color of the Texas Longhorn. You set this against a backdrop of white and it just really pops and stand out. Again, I mentioned I live in Texas. I don't even really like the University of Texas, truth be told. I wasn't born here. I didn't grow up here. I'm indifferent to this team, but I gotta just respect how recognized, how simple yet distinguished this this logo is. I mean, even on the actual university, like the brand guidelines, it's mentioned that this is the most recognized collegiate athletics mark in the world. And yeah, that does feel extremely biased, but I gotta say, I quite agree. And this is coming from, again, just like a non-UT fan. I happen to live in Texas. I see this logo everywhere. While I may not care for the team or care about the university as a whole, I can't help but appreciate just how great this logo is. And they've had some fun logos in the past too that have kind of done kind of a more of a better job of showing off like some of the personality of the Longhorn, whether it's like yelling or being goofy or silly or whatever. But yeah, just the silhouette itself of the Longhorn coming at you face first. It's simple, it's effective, and it's the best logo in the SEC, in my opinion. And if you guys agree, if you disagree, that's totally cool. Let's get a conversation going down in the comments. And I just want to say thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you so much for hanging out. Subscribe for more, and we will see you in the next one.